Hi YouTube, and welcome back to my random thoughts on Thursdays. This week I thought I would talk about job interviews from the perspective of the interviewer, mainly because I'm actually interviewing people this week for some open positions I have at my business. And also to give 3 tips on what an interviewer expects from people that they are interviewing for an open position. Alright, so over the years I have had a chance to either sit in on interviews or actually be the interviewer on many occasions when we were hiring people back when I had my old job, etc. And now I'm finally in a position to expand my business, and so I'm now interviewing folks who are going to be basically subcontractors for me. I'm not actually hiring employees, and that's for an entire other video if I ever decide to make it. So with that experience, I have sort of kind of come up with a number of things that I'm looking for when I'm interviewing someone. And what I'm going to provide you right now are my top 3 tips of what I look for and what I think a lot of interviewers are looking for when they interview people for jobs. So, tip number 1, always present yourself professionally. You could be doing a phone interview, you could be doing an in-person interview, you could be doing a webcam interview, it doesn't matter. You want to always present yourself professionally, not just by how you look. If you're doing a phone interview, the way you look really doesn't matter. However, also the way you speak. So you want to leave things like slang at the door. You don't want to be using ain't and other slang words and things like that. And to be perfectly honest, I don't even know what current slang is out there and things, so I'm not going to even make examples. But if you tend to use a lot of slang in your everyday language with your friends and with your family, try and tone it down and not use it in an interview, because it doesn't sound very professional and people are going to pass you over if you use it too much. Now, if you're using industry jargon, that's an entirely different thing, and that actually can show that you understand and know what you're talking about to a degree, as long as you don't overuse the jargon as well in an interview. And obviously, if you're doing either a webcam interview or an in-person interview, you want to make sure you're dressed professionally as well. Cleavage is not appropriate. Dressing, if you're a female, dressing like you're going to a club is not appropriate. Suit and tie for a gentleman is usually always a good way to go, although not everyone owns a suit and tie, so a nice pair of slacks, a nice pair of shoes, a nice shirt will go a long way for an interview as well. Jeans, don't wear jeans. It doesn't matter how casual of an office you're applying for. You could be interviewing at Facebook. I don't care what the CEO wears. You want to dress professionally for your interview. Once you actually get the job and the way the culture is, then you can dress appropriately for the culture of the company, but leave the unprofessional clothing and language at home. So, tip number 2, always be prepared. So always make sure you've done your homework, both on the company that is hiring you, because they may ask you questions pertaining to their company in particular, just to see how well prepared you are for your interview. Also, be prepared for the subject matter. Make sure that you are familiar with all the requirements of the job, and make sure that you're prepared to answer questions on every single bullet point that they have in their job description. They might not ask questions from every single bullet point that they had in there, but you never know what they're going to ask, so be prepared. Let's say, for example, that you meet all the requirements except one. Let's say one of their requirements is being proficient in Microsoft Word, and you're a little weak on that one. Well then, go somewhere. If you don't have it at home on your computer, go to the library, go somewhere where you can have a chance to play around with Microsoft Word and familiarize yourself with the basics. How do you set bullet points? How do you set indentations? How do you do a table of contents? You know, those kind of things. Make sure that if there is an area on the requirements that you're a little bit weak on, you have some experience but you're not an expert, go out there and do your best to be prepared and learn you know, even through Google, reading a blog post about how to best do things with Word, whatever. Just be prepared to answer all those questions and be able to show that you have knowledge in the areas, even in the areas you're a bit weak in. It's okay to admit that, you know what, I'm a little bit weak in this area, but here's what I know. You know, and if they ask a question, you can answer. Listen, I'm answering this the best as I can. I believe I have to do it this way, but this is not my strong suit. You know, be honest, but be prepared to answer questions, and just be prepared in general and understand both the company that you're being interviewed for and the job that you're being interviewed for. Too many people I see just go by the title of the job and think that they can nail the interview and haven't read through the requirements at all and end up not meeting half the requirements. And it's a waste of both your time and the time of the interviewer if you do that. So, you know, please be prepared. Finally, tip number 3 is be prepared to ask good questions. Not only are you going to be answering questions, most interviewers are expecting you to ask them good questions as well. And not just the obvious, hey, describe the average day at this company, or how much is the salary going to be, and what's the benefits package, and those kind of things. Everyone asks those kind of questions. And you want to leave those things to the very, very end. You don't want those to be your first questions. You want to have some insightful questions to ask the interviewer. So here's a really good example. So let's say the company that you're interviewing for happened to have a really bad quarter previously and had some layoffs. That would prompt me, if I was being interviewed for that job, to ask a question about, okay, I saw your press release about your quarter. I saw that you're financially were struggling last quarter and that you laid off X number of employees. What does that hold for the future of my position if I get hired? So that would be a question I would ask. And asking that question is very insightful to the person who's interviewing you, because it shows, one, that you really did do your homework and you really did research the company before you came to the interview. And two, it shows that you want to make a long-term investment in your career and in your job if you get hired. That you're not just there to earn a paycheck and hop to some other place as soon as a better opportunity presents itself. That you're actually concerned that you may or may not have a long-term job at this company depending on how they do financially. So always be prepared to ask at least one really good, insightful question, preferably at least 2, because you don't want to waste the interviewer's time by asking him a ton of questions, but you want to ask something insightful that shows your intention for your career and your intention for the job, as well as how much you've prepared for the interview. All right, so those are my 3 tips, and I know that sometimes my vlogs get really long, so I figured I'd get the most meaty part out at the beginning of the vlog. And now what I thought I would share with you is a story about one really bad interview that I had. I was interviewing for a position. I was the interviewer, okay. We were hiring for someone to help us with our website. We needed a web developer, someone who was really proficient with HTML, JavaScript, and I think CSS was around already at that point. So, but we were mainly asking about HTML and JavaScript for the website. And I'm telling the story to kind of illustrate my 3 points earlier, although you don't have to watch the rest of this if, you know, this gets too long and boring for you. But this person that came in for the interview, ultimately we didn't hire him, and you'll see why in a moment. So point number 1 was to present yourself professionally. Well, this person came to the interview dressed in a long black trench coat, some kind of rock band t-shirt, jeans, and ratty sneakers. It didn't even look like he combed his hair that day. So first impression immediately was like, who the heck is this slacker? Why is he even here interviewing for a job? But we decided to proceed with the interview anyway, and we brought him to the conference room for the interview. First thing he does is sit down in a chair and plop his feet up on the table, which we had to ask him politely to please put his feet down. So that immediately was a red flag right there, and I believe even if he had been amazing throughout the rest of the interview, we probably wouldn't have hired him just for that alone. Alright, so if you remember point number 2 of being prepared, well, one of the things that was important for the job that we were hiring there was someone who knew both HTML and JavaScript. I knew HTML very well, so I asked all the HTML questions, and my colleague knew JavaScript really well, so he asked all the JavaScript questions. Needless to say, we actually never got to the JavaScript questions, and here's why. I was asking some very basic HTML questions. So anyone who knows HTML at all would know that, you know, obviously all the tags come in brackets, but to do an unordered list, you start with li for list item, and then all of the individual list items, you have an open ul tag for unordered list and a closed ul tag at the end of the list item, and then you keep going through each individual items to set up an unordered list. Unordered list basically is a bulleted list. And I don't even remember if we asked bulleted or unordered list, either way. But for every single question like that we asked, and I think we ended up asking him like 5 different things, every single one of them he said, oh, I'd have to look that up. Well, if you have to look that up, it means you don't know HTML, and it means that it's going to take you too long in order to do the development that we need. We need quick turnaround time, and if you're having to look up every single basic tag, I think he even had to say, I have to look that up for paragraph, which is basically the letter P inside the brackets. That's it. You set a paragraph that way. If he didn't even know that, then he clearly didn't know what he was doing. And so immediately, if he hadn't failed the interview already with his inappropriate clothing and attitude, his lack of knowledge was, you know, completely got him out the door anyway. Certainly wasn't going to hire someone who didn't know the basics of HTML very well. So if he hadn't already failed at presenting himself professionally and being prepared for the interview, number 3, he also didn't ask us any questions. Other than, I believe he did try to ask us how much we were paying for the position. And he was a contractor, so he was going to find that out from his contract company anyway and not through us, because what we were paying would be different than his rate that he was earning. Be that as it may, between all 3 of those points, it was very clear that he was not the candidate for us, and we did not hire him. And ultimately, you know, I think we interviewed several people, and we finally found someone who knew the development skills very well, dressed professionally, and asked good questions about the position and everything. And ultimately, that's the person that we hired. So anyway, thanks for listening to that story. And if you liked this vlog and my kind of giving little kind of common sense tips on things based on my life experience, please let me know. Leave some comments below, like this video if you liked it, and if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, and until next week, bye-bye.